Hello, anyone who has shown up at 7 o'clock for this opening sort of reception for our new show. Before we get going, I would just like to say thank you to our wonderful artists for being our first artists during our reopening after the COVID closure. So it's pretty great to have this beautiful show and these talented artists here tonight. And we are here at the Silk Purse Arts Center in West Vancouver, which is on the unceded and ancestral territories of the Squamish and the Musqueam peoples. And as guests, we are so incredibly thankful to be here in this beautiful spot with our wonderful neighbors. So now, let's get to talking to our awesome artists for this exhibition, Feeling the Pull, with Pierre Leichner and Edzy Edzed. Hello, guys. Awesome. So thanks so much for showing up tonight. Why don't each of you just kind of maybe just introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't know yet?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. So so I'm Pierre Leichner, and I'm a multidisciplinary or interdisciplinary artist, which means I work in different medias on different topics. I also see myself a bit as a research artist, and I also do work in the community, working with different community groups, because I believe that art is a way of knowing things and creating community. Does that work?
That's awesome.
Okay. And I've been doing this really only for about 10 years full time.
Yeah, and so I became interested in doing gouged work in 1986, and this is a continuation of that process. I was starting to do a series, actually what I would have considered myself to do as a manifesto about my thoughts in art and perhaps where I was going to go with it. And I looked at people like Patterson Ewan, for example. He was a representational artist and into the landscape mostly. I think he actually redesigned landscape because he was into geology and so forth. Working in Montreal, though, he was into the people and painting people. And he dropped that and basically started to do this landscape painting. There was no abstract in his work, and I think that's what got me excited, that I couldn't find anybody else actually doing this kind of work. Then I also ran into Jack Derrida's work. The Truth in Painting actually came out in 1987, halfway through my series, and I thought perhaps I could be one of those deconstructivists that he was talking about, which brought me to the University of Victoria to do a BFA honors ultimately. And from there I've been studying this gouged work, still having not found anybody else to do it until very recently in Poland, a Japanese artist. But yeah, this is something that I think Pierre and myself found common ground, working with gravitational waves, etc., and using gravity, now with the same gouged feature. And yeah, it's an interesting perspective, because it was just recently realized that we had concrete evidence of these gravitational waves through this LIGO laser interferometer, gravitational wave observatory, both in I think Washington and Louisiana. And so here we are. We're trying to go ahead and demonstrate referentially, if nothing else, this type of thing through our art. That's it.
So as you mentioned, as you just recently, gravity is the inspiration for this exhibition. So what is it about this force of nature that has compelled you to create art?
Well, it's not just the gravity portion of it. With spinning, this has a history to it.
History.
In the history, yeah, it goes back a little ways, but there's also the fluid painting, the dynamic fluid painting that was discovered. I could get into that a little bit as well. But, and the gouge, obviously.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it seems like those three elements are my exploration in terms of art. And yeah, there was a discovery by David Sicario back in Mexico that basically noticed that there was a certain type of dynamic that fluid art, the way the densities mixed, that it would give you fingers and kind of displayed a cell formation, you know, that gave you this odd kind of dynamic with paint. But actually there was another discovery earlier in science. I believe their names were Raleigh and Taylor, who worked in Cambridge at different times. But they also talked about the fluid dynamics and the way that it worked with gases, with liquids, and actually cosmology. So, I mean, even the pulsars, the way they have different densities of gases that mix. I thought that would be a perfect way to go ahead and depict that kind of a phenomenon. And spinning, that goes back a little ways as well. Back into the 1950s, actually, where we had people like Eugene Para develop these machines for spinning paints, and probably influenced a lot of other people. It wasn't just him, it was Jean Tinguely and Alphonse Chingling. Basically, they all had different machines, virtually at the same time, inventing at the same time. But people like Damien Hirst were also spinning after that because they had seen it on TV, believe it or not.
And you make it sound like we're not original.
You know, it's always the innovation.
Well, we are pushing the envelope on it.
And I haven't even got to his concave portion or the folded space or anything
no,
that
but
has.
we can talk about that as well. But
yeah.
really, I mean, the thing is, I don't, you know, for me, I look around the world and I'm curious about things, and things come up at different times, and obviously gravity is, and for that time and space is something that we all live in all the time, and yet we don't really, it's a mystery, right? It's a great mystery, and it holds a lot of possibly understandings to our future. So I like to kind of go and can push art or see how art can help us understand some of the mysteries that are around us. And gravity and gravitational waves are very current nowadays. We're making some breakthroughs on there. And that's how, to me, it came on my radar at some point that maybe it'd be interesting to kind of give an artistic interpretation, a poetic interpretation. I mean, these are not scientifically, our paintings here are not scientifically driven in a sense. They are really our reaction to what we hear, like everybody else on Google or YouTube, about gravitational waves. It works on us, and we translate it into these, well, I like to think, your beautiful pieces of work, and that's what influences us. While at the same time, we also use gravity as one of the tools in our paintings, as you mentioned, both in the paint, in learning how to paint different paints, some sink and some rise, and also in using the spin, which is also kind of a form of gravitational form. So that's, I think, part of what, for me, certainly kind of drew me to this, to the gravity aspect and the black holes.
And that's why you can inspire me.
Now we inspire each other.
So you guys have both mentioned, using the gravity to work with the paint. Can you explain, for maybe anyone watching who doesn't necessarily know what you're talking about when you're talking about, spinning the paint and pouring the paint?
Oh, well, that's what we were talking about, is the development of this fluid dynamic in liquids. And it appears that when you have two different kinds of liquid, and it could be different colors, it could be different elements in the actual emulsion, they behave differently if they have different densities. That means that you can layer these paints in specific ways and have them pass through each other. And there's a little bit of chemistry involved, of course, And Pierre says, it doesn't sound like we're inventing a lot, but it's how we push that. And we always think in terms of Well, this is being done, and this is why I bring up other artists. You know, that there was a development. I mean, we're not the color field artists of the past. Okay, so there's a little bit of innovation that we go through too. There was nobody else that was doing gouge, okay, at that point in time. It's a lot harder to do what Pierre does too, in terms of the convex, or concave work that he does. Convex is being done, okay, but you know, the concave is a little bit different. He's also using other elements that you don't see. For example, the resins, okay, so. You know, he's got different things going and is experimenting at all times. And yes, there's a beauty to it. You know, he's got the beauty there.
They do too, very much. But you know, the thing that we both use, which I think is also different, is found objects. A lot of it, whether it's tabletops or whole record player or a dish or doors, in my case, that is important as well, because the objects we use have a history of themselves. You know, they're not just, I mean, sure, painting and canvases are important too, but a blank canvas, you know, it doesn't have a history. And I mean, you could get even kind of metaphysical with it in the sense that the objects, when they're used and they have a history of their own, they carry some energy and some sort of history in their molecules, entanglement and so on. So I think it's important that this be mentioned as well, that for the majority of the work here, it is found objects that we pick up in different places, abandoned houses, as well as you know, your Value Village and all those places have wonderful things that we can find. And that makes us, again, what we do different from what has been done before in terms of using fluid or splash pouring paint.
And there's also the other element of personal connection with it. You can actually move a lot of Pierre's work so that it's kinetic at the same time. But yeah, it invites the people to go and actually touch the artwork, which is not normally done. You know, it's to stand back. Oh my God, it's a painting. Yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit different as well. We've also got things that are actually kinetic, so that they move, you know, by motors and so forth. So we try to add things to this fluid painting thing that maybe other people haven't touched so much. So we try to touch all the bases that we see. But I do like the found object thing, you know. We're always searching for something kind of novel, and it gives you a sort of a basic storyline. But it's about mark making and about giving you a different narrative that you've seen in past history. But I'm always concerned with what actually happened in history.
So you talked a little bit about gouged wood. Edzy, do you want to talk a little bit more about what that might mean for maybe people who maybe aren't familiar with that as a term of reference?
For sure. So we have, you know, Patterson Ewan, which was a great Canadian. He basically started off with gouging wood in London, Ontario in about the 1970s. And he really did try to conceptualize what landscape painting was, and perhaps a little bit of space as well. But large pieces. He was a professor at the University of Western Ontario, and died fairly recently. I believe it's 2002 or whatever. And but back in 1986, I was still looking at his work and realizing that you know, there's something there to add to, you know. And I've been searching, you know, all the files, you know, with all the artwork that I could, you know, Frank Stella for one, and Lucille Fontana another, and finding, you know, common ground with these people. But I thought that perhaps I could have something a little bit more subjective that I could add to this story, you know, that I didn't find in all these other people's work.
Someone who doesn't know gouge painting.
So what it comes down to with gouging is that I could use chisels, for example, and rough up a surface. But plywood was not always known, especially in antiquity, let's say. Okay, so it's a modern type of a material. And so how can you manipulate it so that it's a little bit different, like a canvas, mind you, but at the same time, how do you manipulate it with hand tools, starting off with? And then you've got the basic routers, you know, you've got die grinders. I don't know whether, you know, your audience would know all of these things, but those are standard tools that even Patterson Ewan would be using. And the bottom line with that is it evolved. Most of our tools are, a little bit more sophisticated than they used to be at the time that Patterson-Ewing was doing his things. We've got computerized routers now that I can actually make geometric shapes onto plywood that were not really that easy to do by hand.
You've got beautiful pieces of gold. It's gold and it's many
golden ripples in space-time. I love that piece too.
And it's a lot of circles intersecting, which you couldn't do without computerized.
No. And it kind of reminds me of Bridget Riley with her op art as well. So you take different elements from our history and you try to reinterpret them through the gouge and see if you can do something novel, that they couldn't actually produce at that time. So gouging is still routering, and I'll keep exploring that until probably much later.
That's great. There's actually some examples of this artwork they're talking about right behind them. Some gouged wood right behind Edzy, and some pouring and spinning right behind Pierre.
Yeah.
That's pretty great. So you talked a little bit about your use of uncommon materials and trying to trying to find something new, something different to paint on, to work with. I'm assuming you both started in traditional mediums instead, like with canvases or just regular wood sculpting kind of a thing.
Oh, we've touched it all.
Yeah.
We've touched it all, virtually.
Yeah.
I haven't been doing too much on canvas. I have done a little bit on canvas because of Lucille Fontana, and I wanted to go and reinterpret some of the slashes, but it's not quite the same. I love wood, so I've got a bit of a background with furniture building too, and I know joinery, although I don't really want to be a furniture builder, but I do love the sensation of working on wood. So we've got other materials. We've got sculpture as well, and I've got a few pieces of sculpture behind you. Actually, I think of them as actually painted sculpture. There's a difference. There's no gouging on it. Okay. The other piece in the other room there basically has got elements of steel and chrome, and the fluid painting portion. But also I'm looking at the way to interpret the center using a very, very dark color, very dark black. And I think it's because I wanted to look at what Hubble could see in terms of space-time. There's a kind of a block. You cannot go to the very, very start of anything because it's kind of a dark zone. So they've got, about 300,000 years there that they cannot penetrate. And although you can go look up, look into the terms of 14 billion years, that's amazing in itself. There's still a dark spot there. We can't see what happened way before. So it's kind of an interesting thing for me that way too.
And a huge source of inspiration, it sounds like. There's so many possibilities within just that idea alone.
Imagine what we can see because of YouTube and all the films of all the exploration that they've already done. So there's a big field here to actually explore. But I look at it as a referential thing. I don't look at it as representational because we really don't know what this thing looks like from billions of years ago. But yes, it's we can point our finger and say, look what we found.
There's of course another history to found objects. It comes to some degree from outside their art. So it got picked up by the big names and so on, but some of the origins comes from really untrained professionals, untrained artists actually. And so I think that's part of what drew me to this, as well as I think like Edzy, we did go through the formal training of painting on regular surfaces and so on. But there's something also more playful in a way about kind of painting on non-traditional objects and so on. It's a little more, for me anyway, it is a little more fun, and it's also not taking myself quite as seriously in a way as if I was to paint on a canvas and trying to paint a black hole right on the canvas and so on. That would to me be a bit more like, okay, I'm taking myself really seriously about what that thing of black hole looks like. But if I put it on the door or on the dish, it's more it's more playful in a way, more interesting. the doors are actually, are related to the idea that gravitational waves and black holes may be opening new doors to our understanding of the universe, and that's a bit of the connection I made to using doors. And in fact, and they may actually indeed be like doors into new spaces. So there is that. So I try to kind of research a bit of a topic, and then while I do my research on it, the medium or the substrates that I will use or we will use come through there rather than just being there first. The canvas isn't there first yet. The ideas are there, and then the objects kind of follow.
So it's just discovery, basically, just feeling it out. You're sort of like artistic pioneers right now, like you're trying to figure out, well, what would being in a black hole look like or feel like, if you were around it. So that's kind of interesting to interpret it that way. It's like, this exhibit is like exploring space-time and gravity and black holes and what that might feel or look like.
Well, I think as he knows as well, I mean, art and science were much closer together a few centuries ago, and then they got split away. And there's a tendency now to try to bring them back together a bit, because I'm certainly convinced that art is a way of knowing, and it's like science is another way of knowing as well. But as humans, we really understand things through art. It is what touches us in our body, and once it connects with us, that's really a deeper understanding than just numbers and images that are scientific, so on, and graphs. So I think the both of them are important to our human kind of knowledge base. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Well, what I enjoy about Pierre's work in particular is that it even, his folded doors basically kind of allude to folded space, and he's using novel materials on that too, with the flocking. And you don't always see flocking, with paint,
Flocking.
and as well with the satellite dish and the spinner from fishing. It's almost like fishing for information, and we are doing that, through all the devices that we have in the world, feeding us with all the waves coming through, and it's kind of a metaphor for fishing for knowledge. I love that. And how would you describe it without knowing that this is new technology for us, the satellite dish, and how would you actually manipulate that and make it a metaphor for something else? So, yeah.
Talked a lot about the artwork and your inspirations, but you guys have talked a lot about how much you appreciate each other's work. How did you guys meet and become artistic comrades?
Oh, we're connected in many ways, actually. But it was mostly through volunteerism, through galleries that we met. And recently we've been collaborating with, helping other artists basically to go and find their voice. And Pierre in particular has, been sort of influential with other organizations. In particular, one of the oldest art communities in North America, the CACV, Community Arts Council of Vancouver. So he was president there, and I think he's still the artistic director. But we're working on other projects like the Vancouver Outsider Arts Festival as well, and trying to help other people to go ahead and show their work where they might have limitations, through the regular gallery systems, So yeah, we've got mutual interest in many ways.
So I think we met probably mostly at first through both being volunteers, members at Gallery Gachet in downtown East Side. But I was really impressed. I mean, Edzy had a solo show there, and I thought, oh wow, this is tremendous. It was fantastic work. And then we both also have kind of, I don't want to say, I would say science nerds. I don't know. I mean, we're interested in science, so that kind of
both of us
of connection. And so we started talking about that, and I had the equipment to spin things, and Edzy had the knowledge about the pouring and the different weights and paints and so on. So it started by saying, okay, well, let's see what that looks like, and how can we, you know. So I learned from him, and I had some of the equipment, and away we went.
That's awesome.
The history.
Have you guys ever collaborated on a piece together?
Not really, but you know, it's intellectually that we always do. You know, we pop things off of each other continuously, right? And you know, no doubt that we're going to do something, you know, together, and maybe it'll be a big piece as well. You know, but you know, you form ideas over a period of time, and you want to go and experiment a lot more, and then you want to pull off the definitive piece or whatever. You know, and it would be exciting to do that actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that we cross-pollinated in a way, so I find myself doing things that Edzy is doing, and hopefully he's finding things that are coming a bit from seeing my work. So we'll kind of, you know,
So there's always a continuous collaboration anyway, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, it does happen, which is good.
That's cool. We just have a comment from someone watching. Doria says that my mother was a chemist major. My late father was an artist and entrepreneur. Me, I'm lost in space, somewhere in between. That kind of sounds like what you guys are talking about, that marriage of science and art, and how that can affect a lot of people in different ways.
Sure. Absolutely. And I saw that in many people, actually, you know, that they've got family histories with mathematics, but they've got a crossover into astronomy. They've got different people in their family doing artwork at the same time. And, you know, it's easy to go ahead and start to blend these, you know, when you've got this kind of influence. You know, so, yeah, there's plenty of room to move then.
Totally. So this is we've kind of run through all of the questions I had prepared. So let's go a little freeform, I guess. Since this is our first exhibit here at the Silk Purse since reopening, I'm just wondering how you guys have dealt with the past couple of months as artists. Did shutting down affect your artwork in any way, your artistic practice, or maybe did you have some exhibits that you had to postpone?
That's a long story. That's a very long story, because we had shows going at the same time, and we got sort of canceled, and we had to wait to get our artwork back, and it was kind of disappointing in those kinds of ways, but the venues were great. We had one at the Michael Wright Gallery at the very same time, and so we still exhibited quite extensively. There were a number of people that saw the show, but it could have been a little longer, and we just got it back at the end of, what was it, end of June, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was
Cancellations were definitely sad. You know, I mean, there's nothing we can do about that. There was a bit of a shift to trying to get more virtual. That's what we're doing right now, and I mean, it just doesn't beat. I mean, for me, it's not the same as person-to-person contact, obviously, and it's also certainly not the same as coming in and seeing the work. I mean, you can see it on a flat screen, but it's just never going to be quite the same thing. So I'm a bit worried about where things are going. I hope that there will be sooner than later a recovery where people will be more comfortable coming out again and going to galleries and actually seeing things and meeting the people, meeting the artists, as well as chatting and talking. So it's not, you know, people see a positive aspect possibly to it being more available online. Different things are online, so you don't have to leave your home. You can actually see some other things, and that probably is a bit of a positive there. People will be more creative on putting things online, festivals and so on, and developing better technology about it. But to me, I guess it's not going to. I hope it doesn't stay too much. You know, that it won't replace what art is about, which is really about exchange, communication, and so it does worry me a bit.
Yeah, places like the H.R. Macmillan Space Center there, we have, negotiated for, to have an exhibit there, and that was a real disappointment that they, had to shut down. So we're going to probably give it another try for next year, but hopefully everything goes back to normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the perfect spot for this artwork.
It is, and there'll probably be a lot more by then.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're still producing art. It doesn't really seem to slow us down that much.
Excellent.
But yeah, it's a lot of the pieces here are actually from 2020. So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
To hear that you're continually working.
Oh yeah.
Nothing has kind of stopped you. This has been more sort of like now you have time to actually focus on doing a bit more work than say because you have to prepare for all these shows or other events or work or that sort of a thing.
Pierre is much more busy than I am. He is extremely busy, but I have more time. Yeah, it is something that you got to do though, is research all the time and try to do as much reading as you can on this stuff, and try to get another aesthetic. It's not always easy to go and find something that you can switch to and that you can say that's brand new for you. But that's what you want, and you like to think that you're improving at all times too. To rehash what you've already done doesn't make sense really for us. So we got to try to push that envelope as much as we can, and you got to look around, see what our competition is doing too.
Totally. No, that's awesome.
I was just thinking, actually, we're coming back to what you were talking about. I have tended to use mostly metallic colors because of the supposedly, I guess, the creation of these metals during these big collisions of black holes and so on. But now, under the influence by Edzy, I actually working on a piece that has more of his colors in there and see how that, while maintaining some of that my techniques. So it still won't look like his, but I'm trying to, kind of say, okay, maybe I'll try to break out of the metallics and see what happens if I use some of the colors.
Yeah, and I think I've got to do the same thing with the metallics and see where I can go with that. But that's the way it is. You switch positions a little bit, but I've already learned from Pierre quite a bit. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going in fully blind. And at the same time, I've got a different kind of, a substrate to work on. So I'm going to expect different kinds of effects, let's say, But I'll also try the resins. The resins are beautiful, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can add the metallics to that very readily. And but I'll try the other colors too. I mean, there's many colors you can use with these resins. So that's another thing, another push. And we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, for the viewers, we're going to branch out into some broken paint chips, things like that. So with resin. So who knows what the future is going to be, but we're planning to kind of experiment further.
Very cool. Things to look forward to.
Yeah, so you don't know what happens when you fall into a black hole. Who knows what's going to come out of it?
Might be a new universe.
I know. So.
Totally.